And I believe that the approach, or what you're going to be hearing about, is something that I think we can all learn from, which is monitoring and evaluation, which might well be very much the weakness that many of us experience in initiatives and projects that we undertake, that we don't consider how we're going to monitor and evaluate the impact and success of our particular interventions. And the approach that Wits has taken with this is using theory of change. So, Mxolisi, we look forward to hearing about how you've progressed with this project. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nikki. Good morning, everyone. So what I'm going to do is, I'm sure that most of you know that we were asked to come up with a bonus project as part of the Siyaphumelela Partners. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to briefly show you some of the key highlights in terms of our bigger VETS Siyaphumelela project. And I think Professor Crouch did touch on some of those issues yesterday, some of our findings. And then I'm going to come to the bonus grant progress report in terms of how we have progressed so far. So with regards to our main Siyaphumelela project, so one of our objectives was to be able to implement the student BQ. So what I'm showing here is what we have seen is in the last 4 years, we've seen a significant improvement in terms of the response rate. So when we started in 2016, our response rate was at 80%, and this year we have reached the 99% mark. So the idea here is in the next couple of years, we should be at a stage where we have collected all of the background information from all of our students in the campus, so that then it becomes easy for us to be able to design support programs and be able to assist our students. And then with regards to our first generation status, what we've seen is the number, especially the percentages in 2019, it has slightly dropped in terms of our first generation students. And what I want to highlight is in terms of the schools that the students come from. Mainly they come from well-resourced schools, so that would be a quintile 4, 5, and private school. And I think that has sort of like stabilized in the last 4 years. What I want to bring to your attention is the plans for tuition payment by the student. So what we've seen in the last 4 years is we've seen a complete shift. So when you're comparing 2016, most of the students, they were indicating that their parents will be covering their tuition. So that percentage was at around 56%. And those who were relying on NSFAS at that stage, the percentage was 14. And then fast forward to 2019, you'll see that those students who are relying on NSFAS for their tuition payment has actually overtaken the percentage of students whose parents are going to be paying for their tuition. And that also brings, I think, in terms of the socio-economical issues that we are facing. And I think this trend actually is going to increase. So at VETS, we anticipate that we will have more of these students who are relying on NSFAS. And then regarding the accommodation plans, you can also see that the number of students expecting to be accommodated at the university has also gradually increased. So this year, that number is sitting at 33%. So also that talks to the expectations that students have in terms of how universities are preparing for them. The last one, which I just want to highlight, would be the distance traveled by the students. So one of the questions that we ask students is, if you are going to be staying off campus, can you estimate in terms of the distance and the time that is going to take you to come to university? And increasingly, we see that those students indicating to be traveling for more than 20 kilometers, I think that percentage is also increasing. And it also comes to issues of them attending, issues of them, exposed to some of the harassments, especially those that are using public transportation. And then also what then we ask students is in terms of their exposure and use of certain facilities in high school. What I want to bring to your attention is the use of computers. We see that it rates the lowest in terms of their exposure to these facilities. And we know the implications that has to do with regards to submission of assignment, conducting of how the academic structure is being proposed. So those are the challenges actually that now we are finding. But I just wanted to highlight that. So my focus and the idea is, once we've collected all of this information, it's been now 4 years, so we are at the stage where we are feeding this information into how we design our support interventions at the faculty level, and also now beginning to look at some of the predictive modeling. And yesterday, Professor Crouch did mention that we're also looking at persistence modeling, so that this information feeds into our plans and how, as vets, we are planning to proactively support students even before the start of the academic program. So now coming to the bonus grant proposal, I think in the beginning, I was telling Nick yesterday that at the beginning, we were very optimistic. So the purpose of the bonus grant was think as innovatively as you possibly could, but the catch is you have to be able to show how are you progressing. And I think on our case, we're a bit optimistic, and then we thought what then we will do is we will see how we can be able to evaluate the 5 flagship student support initiatives which are happening at the 5 faculties, and be able to see which ones are working best, which ones can be scaled up. So that was what we initially thought, and at that stage, we thought that was a brilliant idea. And then later on, and then I realized that actually it was sort of like a stupid idea to come up with it, because there were challenges which are associated with that. So what then I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you what we've done so far and what are the plans going forward. And I'm sure that most of us, we know that as higher education institutions, we are now responding proactively to the challenges of low throughput rates and success rates which are faced by our institutions. How do we do that? We design and implement various forms of student support initiatives to assist our students. So there are many factors that manifest as root causes for the observed low throughput rates and success rates. As a result, different support initiatives are designed to respond to different levels of challenges encountered by the students. So even though some of these support initiatives have been implemented for some time, even years at VETS, to date there's been no official institution level evaluation of these initiatives for their effectiveness and impact on student success. So in trying to establish the monitoring and evaluation of these support initiatives, what becomes critical actually is some of the questions that we must keep in mind. So one of the critical questions is, what has informed the design and content of the current support initiative? So in most cases, you find that we come up with ideas in terms of the support initiatives, but the critical question is, what data has been used to inform such choices, even in terms of the content of that program? And the second one is, are there clear targets to be achieved? So do we know exactly, when we are designing our support interventions, what exactly do we want to achieve? The third one is, how do we know if the initiatives are successful? So, and then at that level, we have to know, how are we going to measure if or how well are we succeeding? And the last question is, how do we know if another initiative is likely to work even better? So are there lessons that can be learned from other initiatives in terms of sharing the best practices? And I think this cartoon actually, it depicts it very nicely, because sometimes once you start developing an initiative, because it's your baby, you will always think that it is working, even though sometimes it is not working. I like this one. It was shared with us when we were doing the training on monitoring. So this dude comes to his friend and he says, you know what, I taught Stripe how to whistle. And then his friend goes to Stripe and then he says, but I don't hear him whistling. So the friend replies and he says, no, I said I taught him. I didn't say that he learned it. And I think that becomes I suppose, one of the critical challenges, especially with our support initiatives, in terms of course, we are doing the activity, but in terms of the impact, do we also think ahead and see how is that going to be critical? So I think given that higher education institutions are investing a lot of resources, both capital and human, on these support initiatives, and the fact that funding has become a major challenge for our South African context, so it becomes logical that these institutions should begin to put in place monitoring and evaluation mechanisms for these initiatives to be able to assess their return on investment. So what then our main aim, as I've mentioned at the beginning, was for us to be able to evaluate the flagship student support initiatives which are currently happening at the 5 faculties, with the intention of highlighting those that are high impact and also be able to share their best practice. So some of the specific objectives that we have were to identify all student support initiatives which are currently happening at VETS, to formulate a consensus evaluation framework with specific measurable indicators for assessing the impact of student support initiatives, and to assess the suitability of that evaluation framework by piloting it firstly on those 5 support initiatives, and from there to be able to highlight the high impact initiatives and share some of these best practices. So at the onset of the project, it became apparent that conducting an evaluation exercise based on our approach as stated in the bonus grant proposal will be a huge undertaking. So one major challenge that we encountered is that the student support initiatives did not have a clear monitoring and evaluation plans as part of their initial design. So they were there, but then now in terms of how are we going to be able to go about measuring the impact, and then we found that most of them, they did not have that. Another challenge that was identified is that these initiatives are not structured in the same way, as they aim to address different levels of challenges which are faced by the students in the different faculties, and of which it makes sense. So each faculty will design and develop their own faculty based on the needs of the students. So that is not so much of a problem. And I think with that then comes the issue that at the end, so this means that we are trying now to compare different parameters. So it means we are looking at apples against oranges. So as an example, a student support initiative in one faculty included sessions on curriculum planning, note-taking, study skills, coping skills, financial aid, food security, while another support initiative in a different faculty focused on time management, study skills, note-taking and planning, test-taking strategies, examination preparation, etc. So for some of these initiatives, attendance is compulsory for specific sessions, whereas for other initiatives, attendance is voluntary. And in addition, the frequency of these sessions vary greatly. Others are offered throughout the year, while others are offered quarterly. And in most cases, this leads to low number of students participating in these initiatives. So as a result, the data that you collect from the initiatives is often limited for statistical analysis. And another challenge that we encountered is the lack of proper data capturing system for these student support initiatives. And we find that most of these initiatives capture their data, such as attendance, on hard copies, and this actually makes it difficult for consistent capturing and analysis. So even though there are these challenges which we encountered when we were evaluating this exercise, there is evidence, however limited, of the positive impact that could be attributed to these initiatives. And I'm going to show you some of the positive impacts which could be associated with some of these initiatives. So after realizing these challenges, anyway, because we had already committed adverts that we will undertake this exercise, so one of the things then that we needed to do was to be able to map up all of the student support initiatives currently happening. So we realized that we needed firstly to identify all the student support initiatives that are currently happening at VETS, both at the school and faculty level. And I think Diane did mention and indicate some of these initiatives during her presentation yesterday. So here the aim was for us to be able to get a full picture on the different types of support initiatives, including the initiative name, their aim, the year in which it started, the target, and the contact details of the people who are offering that initiative. So we sent out a questionnaire to the faculties so that they could be able to give us that information. And then the best approach, because of the stated challenges that we encountered at the onset of this exercise, we therefore had to find an alternative approach to this project. So we needed to establish measurable indicators and targets to be used in the evaluation exercise. So as a result, the theory of change approach was identified as the most suitable method to tackle this challenge, since most of these initiatives actually were already in place and had been implemented for some time. So theory of change models are usually mapped backwards for the intended goals, allowing for the identification of the activities required to achieve the goals, coupled with assumptions on how activities will work. So the development of theory of change models, they allow for projects to identify key indicators for monitoring, as definitions of progress and success are clearly defined in that model, together with factors affecting them. And the second one is identifying resources that are required to bring about the change, and also to identify the key stakeholders, and also provide a structure or framework for project evaluation. So with this regard, what then we did was student success stakeholders, so that will be the faculty student advisors, institutional researchers from each faculty, and the relevant support divisions attended a theory of change training, which was offered by the VETS School of Governance. And the main aim of the training was then to be able to capacitate the student success stakeholders on the principles of theory of change and its possible application to the student journey at VETS. So one of the critical outcomes actually was a draft evaluation framework that contains a number of indicators and targets that can be used when evaluating some of the impacts for these student support initiatives. So what then happened was 18 student success stakeholders at VETS attended the training in 2018. And as I've mentioned, that included representatives from the 5 faculties and some of the support divisions. And this year shows some of the robust discussions that we had during the training. So the 3-day training program was conducted over a 3-month period that was between August and September, with a full day for each month. The training course consisted of group assignments, group presentations, and class discussions based on the student success context at VETS. And at the end, participants were given certificates after they completed their exercise. So what then we found was the mapping exercise of the student support initiatives revealed that there are about 40 programs that are currently taking place at VETS across the different schools, faculties, and support divisions. And I think the discussion was this number is low. We are expecting that more people will be able to come up and tell us that there's quite a high number of support initiatives which are happening. So what then we found was the primary focus of these support programs could be summarized as spanning from those that are targeting prospective students who are still in high school, to interventions that support students during their university years, employment readiness programs, and those that help VETS alumni to stay connected and involved. And what then we found was that a full resource guide containing information such as the name of the support program, aim, year in which the program started, and the contact details of the staff offering the support program was developed, and that could be a very useful resource, especially for students, in terms of knowing the types of support initiatives which are available at the university. So due to the large number of student support programs currently happening at VETS, we then decided to focus mainly on the 5 flagship support programs, as I've mentioned. And So this is the proposed evaluation framework that came out of that training with all of the stakeholders. So this proposed framework, you can see that it consists of 5 high-level indicators and targets with an overall weighting for assessing the impact of student support. And then I'm just gonna briefly highlight each. So here, what then we're doing is we've tried to find a balance between the quantitative data, which becomes easy, that will be indicator number 4. So the academic progression, all of us, we are collecting that. And then we also had to find a balance between some of the qualitative data, focusing on student perceptions and their feedback, as well as from staff. And then this becomes, at the end, once we've collected the information, we will get an impact average score that is weighted. So I'm just going to briefly highlight what each means. So accessibility, which is the first evaluation indicator, consists of 2 targets which are focusing primarily on the level of awareness of the support program, including the allocation by the first-year students. The second evaluation indicator, that is the student service experience, consists of 2 targets, and it is trying to ascertain the perceptions and levels of students about the support programs that they are receiving and the self-help seeking behavior of students, especially the at-risk students, after the initial consultation. So here the idea is, how do we empower them after the initial consultations? Are they able to assess their situation to be able to say that I'm in trouble and then I should voluntarily come and seek guidance? The fourth indicator, which is academic progression, consists of 2 targets. It assesses whether the first-year students are returning to the university, that is persistence, and whether they are progressing academically. The fifth one is the wider university climate, consists of 3 targets. It assesses the percentages of students who are proud to be studying at VETS, as well as the prevalence of some of the critical psychosocial challenges, such as mental health distress and food insecurity among the first-year students. This indicator also assesses the percentage of staff members who have high workload, which might have a negative impact on their ability to focus on student support and well-being. So this is what then we are proposing as our evaluation framework. And I think now the question is, how are we going to be able to get this information? Where are we going to be able to get this information? So what then we have is, there are a number of possible sources that could be explored when collecting these relevant data sets for the 5 evaluation indicators. Qualitative data addressing the student awareness experiences and satisfaction levels regarding the student supports can be sourced from the already established first-year student satisfaction survey. So this survey, we conducted annually at VETS, that focuses on the perceptions of first-year students in terms of their satisfaction levels with regards to all of the support programs that we are using. So that is one platform that you can be able to utilize. So here, I'm just showing an example from the 2018 first-year survey, where we are only focusing on the student affairs division. And here, it's going to answer indicator number 1.1, that is student awareness of support services. And we find here, we've got 3 divisions of the student affairs, and the information that we got here, we saw that students were quite aware of the support services, and we could see that the highest feedback response was at 96%. With regards to the FYE, it's sitting at 71%. And then with regards to the institutional culture perception, this is also coming from the 2018 first-year student satisfaction survey. Here we're looking at indicator number 5, that is the wider university climate survey. And 5.1, where we're looking at the percentage of students who are proud to be studying at VETS. We see that the percentage for last year, it was at 95%. And then where we're asking students, are they feeling welcomed and accepted at VETS? The response rate was at 90. Does VETS provide platform for students to debate, make decisions? Their response rate was at 83%. And the one that was low was whether is VETS student-centered or not. And I'm sure that we can be able to work on that going forward. And then, so in terms of how then we can be able to source data for the staff perception. So at WITS, we also have the WITS climate survey that is being done periodically. So all of that information and the questions related to those indicators could be included in that survey, and we're planning to revive that. It's going to be conducted at intervals. So in contrast to the student data, this one will collect between 3 to 5 years, because the logic is staff, they rarely change. Even if they change, you'll find that their perceptions are still the same. And then the academic progression, we all have our student information management system, so it becomes easy to be able to get it from there. So here what I'm showing is 2 support programs which are currently happening in 2 faculties, humanities and CLM, and they've got their own specific interventions. So what then we did was we looked at the participants of those interventions, and then we looked at indicator 4.1, that is the percentage of those first-year students who persisted, and we found that in humanities, the participants, their persistence rates were quite high, 91%, compared to those who were not participating in the interventions. In CLM, it was quite high, 96% of the participants, they returned, they came back to the university the following year. And then when looking at progression from year of study 1 to year of study 2, with the Road to Success program in CLM, we found that those participating in the support initiative, 71% of them progressed to year 2 of their studies. So this shows actually that some of these initiatives, they do have the intended impact. So what then we're proposing is this evaluation framework, we are going to still tweak it here and there, and the aim is in the second semester around October, September, we are going to start collecting the information and see, does it make sense in the context of being able to evaluate our support initiatives. And what we are proposing is this evaluation framework is going to be able to assist whether the support initiative is happening at a school level, faculty level, or anywhere else. Because remember, at the end, it takes the academic aspect, academic marks, it takes the feedback from the students, it also looks at the circumstances of the academic staff, of which I think it becomes holistic. So we are proposing that going forward, this is what we are going to be able to utilize for us in our context at WITS. So these are some of the proposed timelines, and by the end of or early January next year, we should be able to have an idea in terms of the applicability and suitability of this evaluation framework. So we are hopeful that it should make some sense in terms of, assessing holistically what is the impact of those support initiatives currently happening. And I think this work was not going to be possible if it were not for these people who participated, and I think some of them, they're here who are running the support interventions. Thank you very much.
Mxolisi, thank you very much for, I think, what has been a really very interesting presentation on the work that you've been doing there. And certainly I think it's work that many of us will be able to learn from and draw on, particularly as you take it forward and become a practice that could be certainly shared and adopted by other institutions in South Africa and perhaps beyond. So we have time for questions. Any questions for Dr. Mxolisi Masango and or any of the members of his team? Any questions? Bill, are you ready for this one, Mxolisi?
So I think this was really interesting because when we first started talking about Siyaphumelela, actually Max Price at UCT said, that they have lots of academic development programs at UCT, and he's often told they're all great, But he says, you know, he came from public health, and you can't just give out a new medication and say, well, it works great. You have to test it and see, is it effective with this group of people? Is it not effective for this illness? And I think this idea of looking at the existing interventions that you have at WITS to see what is the ROI. If you could only spend 1 rand, where would you spend it? So I think it's just great that you're looking at this. So I'm curious, I know you haven't finished everything, but if you could only spend 1 rand, was there one particular set of the interventions in the 5 faculties that seemed especially effective or that you were most intrigued by?
So you see, Bill, you are trapping me. You are putting me in a very difficult position. So let me just show the framework itself, the proposed framework. So the idea here is it should be holistic. So for example, one initiative, so my support initiative could score low in terms of the student awareness of the support program. So that could be one area where my initiative could be scoring low, and then you find that the next one in that particular indicator is scoring high. So then the question would be, I will go to Danny and say, Danny, what do you do to make sure that students are aware in terms of their awareness levels? What kind of marketing strategies are you utilizing? And I think the whole idea is to be able to apply it in that sense. So I think the 2 initiatives which I've shown, the Road to Success program, I think it's one of the most structured in terms of their application and their approach. And some of the preliminary data that we have, actually, it shows that the participants of that program, they tend to, I think, to progress academically at a higher level as compared to the others. And I think last year we did present a publication on that, if you guys still remember, where we were showing some of the variables in terms of how the participants are performing. But I would say what then, Bill, we are hoping is, because with this framework, we should then be able to have an impact score for each one of these support initiatives, and then beginning now to be able to say in which indicators is that particular support initiative scoring low, and then we investigate further. Because now we have the BQ data, we have all of the information, so it will become much more easier for us to go deeper in terms of that. So I hope I'm not going to be in trouble when I get to VETS.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mxolisi, for sharing the complex work of trying to get things sorted out. I just want to make 2 comments. The first is, when we do the academic advising workshops, many institutions, part of the workshop, the short learning course, is that advisors need to map all the initiatives that happen at the university. And the norm is they are surprised by how much they're doing, and then the surprise lasts about 2 seconds, and then they're depressed about how they're going to get order. Not really depressed, but the challenge is significant to think about how to link things together. The second comment I just want to make to something which I think we're starting to get a sense in various conversations is becoming an issue which we need to think very carefully about. It seems that increasingly class attendance is becoming an issue at many universities for students. Now, the reason I raise it in this context is the question we're starting to ask, and it's an issue for us, we presented on that, is at what point does support become a problem? Now, that might sound counterintuitive, but if you are a student that spends, and the SASSI data helps us with this, spends X amount of time commuting every day, spends X amount of time in structured class activities. If you're in natural sciences, you typically have practicals. You have a very full day. And if we're not going to start having, so part of why sorting out, and I'm linking here to Bill, sorting out what is impactful and what is not, is we're starting to see a trend, and I'm hoping it, but it's a very difficult problem to solve, because students are starting to choose not to go to classes because of assessments, continuous assessments in other classes or curriculum. So it's a difficult problem in terms of how curricula are packed and how we link the support. So I'm in no stage saying that we shouldn't have student support. But I think Mariki's example also, we need to look very carefully at how it can be fit into, and that we understand what our students' time constraints are. And that's why the impact work is so important. So it's for something which seems to me at various universities is becoming an increasingly bigger issue. So I just wanted to make that comment to link to Bill's comment.
Thank you very much. And so that's a comment that I think is very well made. Colleagues, we have run out of time. We've, I think, about 5 minutes into the tea break time. So, Mxolisi, can I thank you very much to you and your team for the valuable work that's being done there. We look forward to really watching this with great interest in terms of how it progresses. Colleagues, could we give a round of applause to Wits, please? Thank you.